Greetings and salutations, young true believers. So, today I wanted to talk to you about the Examining Ethics podcast. Frankenstein and his creation, who's the real monster, right? And in a lot of ways, this particular podcast presents a nice little segue or a bridge between the previous 2 weeks when we were talking about ethical theory and applied ethics. And what we'll be doing later this week, we'll start with the aesthetics portion of our course. Aesthetics, obviously, being that aspect of philosophy that studies the connection between art, beauty, and value. And aesthetics is a part of what is known as axiology, which is the larger philosophical study of value. But there are many aesthetic themes present in this podcast. Now, obviously, the podcast covers a lot of ground. What is personal identity? Artificial intelligence comes into play when you talk about the Frankenstein story. Scientific ethics, the sociology of science, right? But Frankenstein, and this is something that wasn't really touched on much in the podcast. I'm going to talk about this a little bit. Frankenstein, as a novel, is to me paradigmatic of the extent to which art can provide ethical insight. So, let's focus with let's begin with the question: who's the real monster, right? Obviously, the creature is shunned, neglected, traumatized, and becomes antisocial as a result of the neglect on behalf of its creator. It wants love, it can't get love. It wants acceptance by the larger community, can't get that, and so eventually it turns tragic and becomes homicidal. But Victor Frankenstein is, in his own way, a victim because he didn't have a guiding hand. He didn't have a community of scientists to tell him, Victor, this is the path you're pursuing is not perhaps the ethical path, right? And scientific discovery has ethical ramifications. And this actually dovetails with another very important point. Every single piece of technological innovation that humanity creates has ethical import, right? We perhaps didn't realize it, 26 years ago, 27 years ago when the internet came in, but social media is the grandchild of the internet, and now obviously we see there are numerous problems with respect to privacy and race relations and all manner of just social problems that stem from the creation of the internet and social media. And with the exception of maybe a few of you in a class, most of you are probably born, say, around 2000, 2001. You didn't, you grew up your entire life with the internet. I was 20 when the internet came in really earnestly and everyone started getting online, and there was a lot of high hopes for the internet. This was going to banish ignorance once and for all. Any question you had about anything pertaining to the world, any item of knowledge, you would get an accurate answer. People would be more literate and more tolerant and thoughtful and courteous, and well, it didn't quite turn out that way. What we create, our technological innovation, it can help, but it can undermine, and that's the moral of the story behind Frankenstein. We have to be very careful. We want to push our knowledge. We want to push what we know. We want to push what we're capable of, but we invent, Frankenstein's monster. Fortunately, that hasn't happened yet, but, bioengineering could lead to something like that. And we've created far worse things than Frankenstein's monster already, and namely the atomic and the hydrogen bombs, uh, chemical warfare, etc. So the lessons, the moral implications from Mary Shelley's novel are, they ring as truly as they did back in 1818. Um, the need for socialization, for social contact, when people, we know, for example, from ample psychological research, that when human beings are cut off from social contact, it has a deleterious effect on their psychology. They begin to become, it undermines people's sanity. Uh, they become depressed. They can become violent. They can become dangerous to themselves. So it's not good for us to be isolated like that. And you can see the effects that had on the creature in the novel. So as you're listening to that podcast, when you get to the last 10 minutes concern regulation, and not just government regulation, but also, the public regulation of drug companies, et cetera, right? Uh, it's not just the business of government to regulate industry and scientific innovation and research, right? Um, but it's also the public needs to be a watchdog for itself, right? Because um, there are unscrupulous individuals who think nothing more than, I want to turn a buck, and they'll unleash any dangerous product upon the public. And again, we need to be vigilant with respect to that. So think over these issues. You're listening through the podcast, and if you've got any comments and reflection, because this was, I got a lot of emails about this one this week. Students seemed to express interest. Even one student wanted to write on this topic. Be sure to post them in your comments, and I will see you tomorrow.